Well, we've been to Auckland and Wellington. Now we travel to Christchurch to assess the health of its economy. Hello and welcome to Dollars and Cents. I'm Jonathan Mitchell. To debate, Business Canterbury Chief Executive Leanne Watson, City Councillor Sam McDonald and property developer Vinnie Holloway. Vinnie, first to you, how's business in Christchurch at the moment?
It's actually quite positive, Jono. To give you an idea, in 2022 and 23, and now I can obviously only speak for house sales, and that's new house sales, which we do as a company. But in 22 and 23, we sold exactly the same amount of houses, which was about 90, just on 90 houses. And this year, which is interesting, it just goes to show like it was a very steady market, although not as extremely positive as some people would hope. It was very steady, and now we're in September and we're tracking to be at about 110 for the year sales. So just is picking up quite a bit, which is good. It's not like it's booming. And the other thing that we've noticed is there's a huge proportion of our purchases since sort of 21 have been owner-occupiers, around about 80% of them. But of those, we have about a third of them are from out of town moving to Christchurch. I'd like to say it's because the houses are great, but I actually think it's mostly to do with the fact people can have quite a great lifestyle here, similar job opportunities to Auckland and Wellington in terms of, big companies and government agencies and that sort of thing. But and plenty to do in the weekends and good schools to send the kids, but also extremely affordable compared to, say, Auckland and Wellington.
So, Vinnie, are you starting to feel the relief from lower inflation?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, we definitely are. And we're even starting to see, and I'm just talking from a sales point of view, starting to see quite a few investors coming back into the market just because they can see, on the horizon that the interest rates are coming down a bit and they can they can make a new investment property work in terms of actually being able to afford to hold on to it with rent and costs being more closely aligned than they were, say, 2 years ago.
Leanne, to you, how is general business confidence in Christchurch, Canterbury?
So look, it's definitely showed, I guess, renewed optimism over the last quarterly Canterbury Business Survey that Business Canterbury runs, which was really pleasing to see. Now, the survey opened just days following the first interest rate cut, obviously in 4.5 years. So that may certainly have had something to do with it, but it's certainly a welcome sign for the business community and our local economy. So quite a large improvement in expectations for both the Canterbury economy, but also individual business performance. And I think, obviously what Vinnie's just talked about is probably a good indication of that. So a really big turnaround from our last survey in May. So really, really pleasing to see, and early indications that the recent drop in inflation and interest rates are certainly having a positive impact on the business operating environment, despite it still being pretty challenging for businesses out there, and what has felt like a real sort of elastic band economy over the last few years. But certainly, renewed sense of optimism, with a little bit of cautious optimism, I guess, as well, just around things like investment potential, etc. So some of that has just been a little bit tempered by concerns around consumer confidence and demand, which is still pretty slow, and that's still one of the top concerns for business in our last survey.
How would you summarise current conditions then?
Look, I think current conditions, it does depend a little bit on what sector you are in, but current conditions remain still pretty challenging. And I think, we've all heard the term survive to 25. I think there are definitely businesses who just sort of battening down the hatches a little bit. They're not yet looking at, investing in their own businesses, plant, equipment, machinery, hiring more people yet. But there is that sense of things are going to get better in the foreseeable future, but they're just being very cautious at the moment. So things we're still talking to businesses a lot about increased costs. We're talking to them about compliance costs, cutting red tape at both a local government level and a central government level. We've had early engagement with the Ministry for Regulation, for example, to highlight some of those challenges that businesses face that is just continues to add more costs. So I think we're heading in the right direction, but we've got a little way to go. But overall, I think in Christchurch and Canterbury, businesses are feeling pretty optimistic. really interesting that, Vinnie talked about, the number of people coming from out of Christchurch to buy houses in Christchurch. We've had the highest internal migration now for the second year running. So, Christchurch, people are moving here in droves, and I think there's a number of reasons for that Vinnie's articulated already.
Yeah, so are there the jobs available?
Yeah, absolutely there are. And actually some really interesting jobs as well. Christchurch is now a really different city. There's a bit of a saying we have here in Christchurch: if you haven't been to Christchurch in the last 3 years, you haven't been to Christchurch. We've got new and emerging sectors like aerospace. We've got some amazing high tech and innovative companies that are doing some, pretty neat stuff down here. So there are really great career opportunities in Christchurch. There's a bit of a myth that if you want a big career, you go outside of Christchurch. That is no longer the case. And we're seeing that. We've got record high enrolments at the University of Canterbury here. As well. And, again, that's another indication that, people are coming to Christchurch because of all of the things, a great quality of life, great career opportunities. That the affordability is something very real. The average median house price in Canterbury is 680K versus 795 in Wellington and over $1 million in Auckland. So add that to the quality of life, the fact that we've got no congestion, and it's just an easy place to get around. It's a pretty compelling picture.
Let's bring you in, Sam. What are the council's priorities to support businesses at the moment?
Yeah, so there's probably a couple of things. I think firstly is honouring our commitments around large infrastructure. So if you think about Te Kaha, for example, our immediate focus is ensuring that's delivered on time and on budget, which it is at the moment. April 26, we should have that open, which will be a massive economic stimulus to the city. Look, the second thing is actually just doing the basics well. So if you think about our infrastructure relative to, say, Wellington Council, it's very important that we do what we're paid to do. And so we've really focused our capital programs around delivering that. And I think, as Leanne has mentioned, obviously that regulatory impact as well, which is how do we make it easier for businesses to operate, but actually businesses to develop. And I have to say, with the change in government, there's been a real change in focus and actually more pragmatism in doing things easier. And I think that culture change from Wellington will embed itself within local government as well, and certainly make it easier for us to push for change.
What about these projects, these legacy projects from the quake? Are they going to come online in the next few years as well?
Yeah, so I think, like I said, Te Kaha is obviously a significant one, which we need to get completed. Metro Sports, or Parakiori, which is actually being run by the government. So I think a lot of people think that council are delivering that. We're not. We had a fixed contribution to it, and government pick up the tab. That's been delayed for years, I think largely because of the contract structure. So it's really important that gets online. But then you think about other things like the Court Theatre, where we've put a significant amount of money so that that can be completed. We've effectively honoured all of our commitments in terms of that blueprint that was set out by the government. And so, as the Mayor says, Christchurch is really coming into its own now. And as Leanne mentioned, it really is a different city, and we've honoured those commitments. So, look, I think our next challenge is really helping minimise that regulatory impact so that people can do well in Christchurch and we don't put up barriers.
We've heard anecdotally and on the streets in Auckland and Wellington are suffering in their CBDs because of lack of foot traffic, people working from home. What's it like in the Christchurch CBD, Sam?
Look, it's actually thriving. If you're trying to get office space in Christchurch at the moment, you basically can't within the CBD. And again, I think, we have had, and I hate to say it, but we've had a luxury in a sense of being able to reshape our city. And what it's meant is that we're actually a lot more densified in terms of that office space. So, there are good precincts within Christchurch that mean that people are quite targeted to where they work. So, look, people are moving in. I think the important thing for us, though, as a council, is to ensure that people can still move around the city. So the last thing I want to do is prevent traffic being able to get into the CBD. And, one of the challenges we have anecdotally is from people that I talk to is that a lot of our older population don't feel safe driving around the city now. And that's not from crime. That's literally because we've filled the roads with too many other things and they don't feel as comfortable doing it. So, we need to continually look at that and actually just do the basic stuff really well, not over create or, do things too excitingly on roads, just put in good infrastructure.
Leanne, what are the priorities for retailers heading into Christmas and the New Year?
Well, look, I think, we've talked about the central city being pretty vibrant here in Christchurch, and we're really fortunate to have that situation. I think making sure that we've got really good connectivity between the North and the South Island to move freight We've seen some challenges, obviously, with the inter-island ferry. That has a direct impact on our ability to move freight from the North Island into the South Island for those retailers. So that's really, really important, making sure we've got good air connectivity as well. We still import a lot of goods and obviously export. Those things are just fundamental to making sure we've got the ability to move freight in and out of the city and in the region. And I think the other thing is, really getting in behind and backing our local businesses. We've had a push, obviously, during COVID, we saw quite a bit of that, where we saw the vulnerability of our supply chain and people got in and supported local business. And I really hope that continues to happen as we head into those busy periods for retailers where our local community gets in behind and buys local.
Well, Vinnie, do you feel supported by your local authorities, by central government?
Yes, I do. I mean, dealing with Christchurch, I have a few friends who build houses around the country and with different councils, and we find Christchurch City Council very easy to deal with, and it's obviously a very big beast, as councils are, but we do find that we can get consents and get things moving quite quickly in Christchurch compared to other places around New Zealand. We can generally get a consent for a sort of relatively easy infill type development and somewhere close, and we typically do infill sort of 5-minute drive from the city type thing, and we can generally get a consent for an easy development in sort of 6 to 8 weeks. Which is pretty amazing, really. I think when you compare that with other places around New Zealand and other places in the world, it's quite unheard of. And it's probably just Christchurch is a great size, I find, to do business because it's big enough that there's a large population to buy your product, and there's a lot of people who want to move to Christchurch as well, which is great. But then it's also small enough to be sort of nimble and not completely overbearing and so big that you can't sort of get anything done, which I'm guessing larger city councils struggle with.
Does that allow you to thrive then as a business?
Well, part of our business is, designing and selling houses, which is what really helps it. But the other, at the back end, we need to deliver houses as quickly as we can, so that we can hand over houses as quickly as we can. We typically sell everything off the plan, so when people are buying, they're expecting us to build. So it is really important that we deliver as quick as we can as well, because it's all about that consumer confidence, and we get a lot of business from referrals, and it's just good for our reputation, which, we owe thanks to the council, really, because we can actually deliver a house quite quickly to a consumer. We're typically about a year for most of our developments. We do the odd sort of bigger, more difficult, challenging consents here and there, but for most of our developments, we can go from selling a house to handing the keys over in about 12 months.
Could you replicate what you do in Christchurch in another region, or would it be too difficult?
Yes, we could. Yep, we could. And but there's obviously quite a few unknowns. Technically, we could build the same houses we build in Christchurch in Auckland, Wellington, Tauranga, Nelson, and especially with the new densification rules the government's pushing through, it would sort of make anywhere possible. But I wouldn't have confidence anywhere else, and that's not to say we're not going anywhere else, but I certainly wouldn't have confidence anywhere else to go to another city as much as we've sort of been in Christchurch, if that makes sense. So we are dipping our toes into Nelson and Auckland at the moment, and doing a development in each place there. But it'll be interesting to see how they compare to Christchurch.
And Sam, what are the council's priorities heading into next year?
Well, I think the important thing for us is to have that focus continually on infrastructure. So what we've said is, we spend over $500 million a year on basic infrastructure across the city. And so our real focus is getting value from money for that, but actually delivering it. The last thing we want is to commit to the community and then fail to meet their expectations. So look, if we can do that, one of the biggest challenges we've got at the moment is around a treatment plant out in Bromley, which doesn't sound very exciting, but actually impacts everybody across the city. And so when we're thinking about things like that, we're going to continually plan for growth. so that, that long-term resilient infrastructure is in place. And, in my sort of simple view, if council does stuff very basically in a sense of keeping it simple, that helps people thrive because we don't overcomplicate things. And it's really interesting to hear Vinnie's comments because, quite often I hear the bad side of, people come to me when there's a problem, but it's really good to hear good local businesses actually thriving because we're helping to enable. But that's not over yet. We need to continue to drive that.
And in terms of infrastructure, are you talking about doing roads, water well?
Absolutely. So, for example, with the change in government, Mayor Phil Major has really strengthened the relationship. We've got $90 million more over the next 3 years to fix our roads. And so if you think about that basic infrastructure, our goals really are to do that well, but to extract as much money from Wellington as possible on behalf of the city. And, we're succeeding in that. I think government now see us as a thriving, positive place. And so we've taken the approach of let's work with them and let's see what we can get from them. And, that's a really, really good example.
I know you're biased, but why aren't other regions thriving as well as you?
Well, look, I think it's the reality of an earthquake, and that we've been able to reset the city. And when I say we, not the council, actually private developers across the city who have taken massive risk and put a lot of capital into the city. And, that reward is coming through now. But, the reality is they've all had it very, very tough. So you've had 5 or 6 years after the earthquakes where there was the uncertainty and the development, then, eventually hit by COVID. The tenants for a lot of these people haven't been able to get on their feet, and now they're starting to come into it. So it's really, really good.
Sam makes a really good point. Christchurch businesses in particular have faced a significant amount of adversity, over the last sort of 13 years. But what that has resulted in is those businesses being very resilient. And I hate using that term, and most businesses in Christchurch, or people in Christchurch, hate it as well. But the fact is they've had to actually really be, I think Vinnie used it, nimble. They've had to adapt really quickly. They've had to, they didn't have any choices but to work in hybrid situations 13 years ago when we had earthquakes. And so what that has done is it's actually set them up really well for an environment that is in constant change. So I think that resilience certainly pays off. And I also think we've got a really diverse economy. So we're not reliant on, if you look at Queenstown, for example, the majority of their economy is reliant on tourism. We've got a really strong manufacturing base. We've got, continue to have a really strong rural agricultural sector, really, high tech, fintech, tourism. There's so much of our economy is diverse. So I think it has set us up really, really well for the future. And as I said before, we've got plenty of land. We've got, affordability. There's plenty of room for growth. And so investing in long-term growth and continuing to make sure our infrastructure is fit for purpose in the future is going to be really important.
To support our award-winning independent journalism, subscribe to nbr.co.nz.